Let's get the show on the road. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Moondoggy presentation. I'm not going to delay, so let's just go directly into the W's. There are a couple key W's to go over. Number one, who are these guys? Why are they talking? My name is Ian, also known as CCP Playanost.
I'm Ragnar. I'm CCP Ronin as well.
Second question, what is Moondoggy? You may already know the answer if you read our dev blog, or if you cheated and looked at the Fanfest brochure, where this is listed as the in-game browser talk. Yes, Moondoggy is the new in-game browser, revamped, rebuilt, the $6 million, well, not quite $6 million, but we'll get there. The immediate question after that is, where is development going? That's primarily what we're going to talk about tonight, or today. We're going to talk about not just the technology behind the browser, but also what features it's going to offer to users. And I think the topic most of interest of most of the people in this room will be, how is this going to help me as an IGB site developer? Also very important, when can I throw tomatoes at you? If you have any rotten fruit on your person, please hold it to the end of the presentation. I find that's a little disruptive. But the most important question here is why? Why are we developing a new in-game browser? Exclamation point, question mark, exclamation point, question mark, possibly thrown fruit here. There are three key reasons why we decided to undertake this project. The first is performance. If you have used the old in-game browser, you may note that it can be a little bit tardy when loading web pages. It may not be the fastest thing on the planet. We wanted to resolve this. We also wanted to try to reduce its performance impact on Eve so that it could be used realistically when you're actually playing the game and not just when you're spinning your ship in a station. Second, security. Since we are upgrading to a more modern web platform, today's web is a very hostile environment. Anyone in the web industry should know that. So of foremost concern is both the security of your Eve in-game info and the security of your computer. And finally, future-proofing. When we first built the in-game browser in 2003, we built the entire technology stack in-house. What this means is that every time web standards change, that's basically every evening, we would have to go back and upgrade our code. Obviously, we haven't really kept up at all. And so we'd like to be able to, we modularized our tech stack so that we would be able to replace components of it as upgrades became available and hopefully do better at keeping up with the evolving technology platform that is the web. So Ragnar, if you want to take it away, let's go into some user features.
So I'd like to start by talking about actually browsing the IGB as a pilot, using it from that perspective. As Ian mentioned, the first reason why we needed to update was performance. And we're already seeing huge improvements on our CC builds where complex pages or even simple pages are rendering much faster. 1/10 the time for simple pages and orders of magnitude faster for complex pages like NewYorkTimes.com or CNN.com. You can actually have tables now, which is very exciting. And something we'll revisit throughout the presentation is that this is actually going to be in two processes, Eve on one side and web page rendering on the other. So those of you with multi-core machines will actually see a great performance boost because load balancing can keep Eve on one core and the web page rendering on another. So going into the browser would actually provide almost no impact on the Eve gaming experience. Continuing on the performance theme, you will see slightly more memory usage. We're able to render much more complex pages. So, there's improved support, and that does take more memory. Flip side to that, though, is that we're using a very standardized library, the Chrome library, so there's a much lower FPS performance impact. We've done some benchmark testing in-house, and we'll continue doing that as development goes through. We had 320 frames per second on a reference machine, dropped to about 300. We had just kept opening tabs to see what would happen, and once that first tab was open, opening subsequent tabs really didn't have too much of a drop on FPS rate.
Yeah, I think around the 10th tab or something, we lost 3 FPS.
So we're keeping performance very much in mind here, and so far we really like what we see. All right, so starting in on what we'll be carrying over from the old browser. A lot of you know about the Eve headers. When you would trust a website, It would provide information about your session to websites, location, corporation, alliance, who you are, things of that nature. Of course, this is only available if you decided to make that information available. We are keeping all the current IGB headers. There's actually one that's going away, nearest location. Based on the way communication is being changed between the browser and the client, it wasn't really possible. So that is the one that's missing, but everything else is there, as you can see here. All right, so I've trusted this website. It's called whatsmyuseragent.com. I actually mentioned it on the forums, if any of you saw the thread there. And you can do this too, to play around and see the effect it has. But on the bottom, the lower half there, all those HTTP Eve headers are the headers that are getting passed in. So you can see the solar system I'm in, my corporation, region, who I am. And this is all information that IGB site authors will continue to be able to use through the browser once we update and through the whole update process. Another thing to point out while we're on this slide, the HTTP user agent, that actually provides all the information about the rendering engine. It's Chrome, it's Mozilla 5.0 compatible, it's WebKit. And then at the end, we've stuck this Eve IGB down there too as an element. So an IGB site author can just query for that and know the difference between a user coming in through Eve or a user coming in through just regular plain old Chrome and can render the page accordingly. Other features of the browser, we mentioned tab browsing. That will be in the new browser. It's actually up on the build that's going on CC now. The rendering process is separate from Eve process. As I mentioned, another side benefit of that is that if there is a browser crash, big if, never going to happen, it won't kill Eve. Of course, the internet, it has weird web pages, hostile web pages. Things do happen. So this was a very important thing for us to have that Chrome type of architecture where we can sandbox it slightly. So a browser crash, if it happens during a fleet fight, it's not going to kill your Eve client itself. We're also, we're making a modern standard web browser. So you will have bookmarks, you will have history, and you do have view source. We've actually highly upgraded that, so it uses normal Chromium view source. Yeah, sorry. So you actually can get a view source window now with all the syntax highlighting and the formatting you would expect to see, as opposed to just a blob of white text on black. So the headers are site interaction in one direction, right? It's site interaction from you, the pilot, talking to the website. But what about site interaction going the other way, website talking to you? Trusted sites will be able to call JavaScript methods. This is similar to something we had in Eve IGB header, but or Eve old IGB rather, but it's something we are standardizing now. Basically, these JavaScript commands will be able to perform simple commands in Eve. Open a mail, show information about a particular type. Of course, security will be first thing we think of. So anything that would change your status or anything is going to require confirmation. You're not going to be able to, spawn up JavaScript to just take money from people or anything like that. There would obviously be confirmation on anything of that nature. All right, so I'm going to pass it over to Ian, who's going to talk a little bit about the technical structure under the hood.
Yeah. We felt this is kind of important for you to understand. We're going to go through the tech stack. It's going to get a little technical in the middle there, but it's important for you to understand the architecture behind Moondoggie, particularly for IGB site authors, so that you understand some of the limitations that we're going to be imposing on you. Okay, good. So let's just take a quick visual look at the way this is structured. Now, this is just a process level look. Everything here on the right side on my side, on the left side on my side, is inside the Eve process. You might want to move those chairs. So we have Eve itself, obviously, and then inside of Eve there lives a little component that we call Moondoggie. We'll talk about exactly what that does later. And between them there's a little security layer. Across an inter-process communication link is something called ccpbrowser.exe. If you've been using our CC builds and you've checked your process list, you've seen this as wbrowser.exe. That will be renamed in the future, just so it's a little clearer exactly what's running on your computer. Inside ccpbrowser.exe, it looks a little more like this. Down here, you have this little cesspool of content called the internet. And then CCP browser.exe is this big arrow that somehow gets that content over to the happy user playing Eve. The V looks like a nose. That is intentional. But anyway, inside CCP browser.exe, we have three primary components that make up the tech stack. We have Chromium, which is the very basic layer. It does most of the talking with the internet. We have Osmium, which is just kind of a shim layer. I'll get into what that does in a little bit. And then we have a little bit of custom code living above another security gate that primarily handles inter-process communication. Let's go through these one by one, though. So here's Chromium. If any of you are familiar with it, Chromium is basically the open source toolkit that powers Google's Chrome web browser. It's free. Go out there, download it, give it a shot. Anything that works in Chrome, or most of the things that work in Chrome, should be able to work in Moondoggy. This Chrome, if you know the history of it, is based on Apple's WebKit. This actually has a very long software lineage. WebKit was originally based off of, I believe, Conqueror, which came out of the KDE project. KHTML. Okay. Sorry. Thank you. What this does for us is provides a number of extremely useful tools. So as I said, since we don't have to write the code to parse HTML, to do any web page rendering, to decide where things are on the web page, to decide what color they are, we don't need to upgrade any of that. Chromium does all of that for us. So anytime we upgrade Chromium, that will be brought up to date with the latest standards. It also provides a JavaScript engine, so you guys can start doing Ajax and other kinds of modern web technology. And it does provide plugin handling. We'll talk more about plugins later, but in theory, any plugin that works in Chromium could be brought into Moondoggy. I say could. Again, we'll talk about that later. It also provides some low-level libraries, such as inter-process communication, that are very robust and provide an excellent and stable framework for us to build our technology off of. Osmium is the next layer up. It's from one of our smaller technology partners, Krona Software. It's essentially a middleware shim, and what it provides is a wrapper for communications. It basically takes the web pages that Chromium renders and maps them to a 3D surface, which is then easily rendered inside of our 3D engine, which is called Trinity. It also provides an eventing system because Chrome is it's a bit of a hairy SDK. It has a lot of facilities in it that aren't very well unified. It doesn't have a particularly robust or well-defined interface. Osmium, however, provides this nice eventing system that lets us very easily integrate with Python. It works a lot close. It works much more similarly to how Eve works under the hood. And then we have a little custom layer on top of that CCP browser. What that does is basically handles the inter-process communication. It just gets all of that data across the pipe. And it provides a security gate. Anytime that we have a call coming out or data coming out of Osmium, we ensure that it's actually allowed to move across the inter-process communication link. So anything hostile shouldn't get into the Eve process. Now, if we cross that link, we get into fault tolerance. Sorry. Yes, CCP browser also provides fault tolerance. Ragnar talked about this a little while ago. If the browser should happen to crash for some reason, that web page, you go to xinhua.cn, which was crashing us for a while. It means that Eve doesn't go down. You get a gray screen. You hit reload. The whole thing works again. Unless that's the page that's crashing you, at which point, please stop hitting reload. Anyway, across the IPC link, Moondoggy. This is basically where we implement all of the Eve-specific behavior. This is where we define, for example, the trusted site headers. We handle all the trusted site logic. And it's what runs the UI. Very important. Anytime you're interacting with the in-game browser, you're interacting with this particular component. And what it finally does is it provides a last layer of security. It's our last line of defense against anything hostile. Any incoming JavaScript calls from trusted web pages are once again checked to ensure that they are authorized to run, and any inputs that come in through those JavaScript calls are validated and ensured that they're real. If you give us a type ID, we ensure that it's actually a real type ID and not someone's character. Finally, it is the Eve side endpoint for inter-process communication. I think we've said enough about that already. So, Ragnar, why don't you talk about security?
All right, so I'll start off the security discussion. There are mainly two concerns we're thinking of when it comes to security in the in-game browser. The first is hostile code getting into your Eve client. taking your ISK, sniffing your password, anything along those lines. Second is hostile code going into your computer, just getting into your computer, taking your real ISK for us Icelanders, or getting bank information or whatever, both of which are bad things. So the way we basically do this is by making the communication between Eve and CCP browser as unidirectional as possible. You can think of it as you're in Eve, that's you sitting on the couch, and CCP browser is your TV. And when you send a browse command, what happens is all the rendering and any processing of commands takes place here. What's sent back is that rendered 3D texture. So what's important to note is that the web source code never makes it over to Eve. It's all processed in this layer, in the sandbox layer that's not part of the Eve process, before it's broadcast back. So all it gets is these rendered 3D textures and status codes, maybe the title of a page, these events. So JavaScript is the only active point of interaction. But again, the communication is only one way. You can't query for information using these JavaScript methods. So they're only triggering predefined commands. Basically, you tell it to run the showinfo command, and it runs our showinfo code. There's no web-sourced code involved in this. It's just basically pushing a button on that remote. And again, anytime the inputs come in, like Ian mentioned, we validate them and verify them before we do anything. And anything important would require confirmation. JavaScript is controlled deep down at that Osomium level, the middleware level, for who can call it. It uses the same trusted site framework you'd recognize from the trusted site headers. Calls from untrusted sites, therefore, never get into CCP browser and never cross the pipe. So if we enlist the help of our friend Batman, he blocks it. Ian will continue on the security side.
All right, so that's just a few of the things that we're doing to protect your in-game information. Let's talk about protecting your computer. Sorry? All right. So, yes, as I said, plugins earlier. For launch, we will be disabling all plugins. We may eventually enable selected plugins, but that's going to have the CCP soon TM appended to it. I know a lot of people are really enthusiastic about plugins. We've had a number of questions for it. Unfortunately, we've seen enough stability problems with plugins right now that we're not comfortable pushing that out to all of our users right off the bat. But we will certainly continue to evaluate them. We also have two other features, a blacklist and a whitelist. So basically, these are CCP-defined lists of sites. Particularly the blacklist is a list of sites that cannot be visited at any time. For example, a malicious gold seller site. If for some reason you clicked on a link in, say, local chat, it was going to a malicious gold seller site or a site that we know to have a Trojan on it, not going to name names, then the browser would simply refuse to even go to that site. Osomium would recognize that the URL it was attempting to browse to was on the blacklist and just stop that call before any data was retrieved for the web. We'll have some questions on this in a moment. So hold your questions to the end. We have some Q&A coming up. Now, we would love to be able to expose that to you guys, the users, because I know that some people are going to want to block DoubleClick or some other sites. That is not on the table for Dominion 1.0. We are definitely going to revisit it in the future, though. Now, as for a whitelist would be a list of sites that you can always browse. Now, you may be thinking, well, when would I not be able to browse things? Hold that thought. We'll get to that in a moment. So one of the I don't know if you would call it a security feature, but one of the nice ways that Chromium provides security is that it's completely open source. If you know code, even if you don't know code, go download the source code. If you think there's a vulnerability, go try and find it. There's at least 1,000 people out there that are contributing to the Chromium project, and if you think about its long open source lineage, there's probably been a lot more than that, and certainly far more people outside looking at Chromium than we could ever have looking at internal code from CCP. The nice thing about this is that with so many people looking at Chromium, we get relatively timely updates for any security vulnerabilities. Now, these are also relatively easily integrated into Eve, thanks to the modular nature of ccpbrowser.exe. However, there will be some lag time between when an exploit is discovered and published, when a fix is published, and when we are able to actually roll that into Moondoggy and then push it out via a client patch. There is some overhead there. So you may be thinking, well, why would I want to use the browser during that window of vulnerability? It could harm me. What can you guys do to protect me against that? We've devised something called lockdown mode. What this does is it prevents all browsing. Absolutely. You open up your web browser, you try to go to a site that we have not stuck on that whitelist that I mentioned earlier, and the web browser simply refuses to go anywhere. It actually never leaves the Python side. The obvious exception here is certain sites that we can essentially guarantee to not be compromised. These will be things like account management, the forums, and looking forward into the future, Eve's project Cosmos. Also, okay, it's implemented at the Osomium level. Yes, this actually has two security gateways. We have one in the Python level for when you are putting the input in, and then if there's a redirect or something or an iframe on a web page.
Image resource, things like that.
An image resource. Those get blocked at the Osomium level, so again, that data never gets actually requested from the web. The nice thing about this is when or if these vulnerabilities are ever discovered, any one of the devs could pick up the phone, call one of the GMs on duty, and say, hey, dude, press the big red button. It's go time. It's very easy for us to trigger. I think we had it triggered on CC at one point, just to test it out, and a few people noticed it then. But yeah, very easy to trigger, and we're hoping we never have to use this. I think the last major vulnerability of this nature was discovered in like 2001, 2002, somewhere in there. Ish. But if it has to be used, it is there. So, Ragnar, how about talking about to the largest audience here, probably the IGB site developers?
So we've talked a lot about the changes that are coming. I'd like to talk about them again, but specifically how it affects people who are on the IGB site developer side now as opposed to on the browsing side. So what we're doing here, we're migrating to Chromium, we're migrating to a standard, and that's great. We're going to have full HTML specification, divs, spans, tables, nested tables, very exciting things that we haven't been able to do. You'll have cascading style sheets. Those are fully supported. And, of course, JavaScript, as we talked about, including those extra trusted hooks. So the upgrade side comes with some of the unstandard things we had in the past. So these Eve extended URLs, for example, Eve mail and show info : those are getting replaced by the JavaScript hooks, which we'll talk about on the next slide. The refresh session change has actually been removed. Again, because the communication is so unidirectional, it's kind of a technical challenge to put that in. And we may introduce a session change notifier later on, but it was a little too much work for pre-Dominion. And what that did was basically automatically refresh the page when you jumped through a gate or something like that. So replacing these extended URLs, the show info and the email, most are replaced by a simple JavaScript call. So a link that would point at show info for a type ID becomes a JavaScript hook to client.showInfo type ID. So we're hoping this upgrade process is pretty straightforward. The full list is going to be maintained on Evilopedia with old to new conversion. And lastly, the shell exec URL is completely gone. What this did was it basically would allow you to put a URL in, and then you put shell exec on the front to specify that it should pop open in a new browser externally. Since our browser is now totally awesome, we hope that that's not needed. So Ian's just going to talk about a few of the things now that are going to happen post-Dominion.
Yeah, obviously we're delivering a fair amount of stuff here, primarily the new tech stack, primarily the upgraded web functionality, but let's start looking forward. Where are we going to go with this? Now, the nice thing is, because we have additional web features coming that will be a major portion of the Eve experience, we do effectively have license to continue developing Moondoggy, which is very positive. We're very excited about that, and especially because we've seen, particularly in our forum thread, which I'm expecting some of you may have participated in, we have an enormous number of user-requested features. And we do read these. Both Ronan and Nimbus down there have been combing through that thread constantly. And while we may not respond to every single suggestion, we certainly do at least evaluate them. We bring them in front of the managers, of the people responsible for deciding what features go into Eve. And we do try and give it our best shot. So let's talk about a couple things. I think this is the number one requested thing from every single IGB site author out there, particularly the Alliance leaders, some kind of authentication for headers, some way of trusting what the IGB sends down to your site, ensuring that the user in Eve is the same user that the browser says is browsing your site. We've had a couple solutions pitched at us. Someone mentioned OAuth. Another has mentioned OpenID. We've actually investigated our own custom solutions for this. This is something that's actively being researched. We definitely want to do this, but it's probably not something we're going to be able to get in for 1.0. We're going to push hard to get this out after that, because we do recognize the enormous amount of value that this would provide to anyone developing any site that relies on the IGB headers. Another thing that we get pretty often is a number of options, configurability for the browser, particularly options to turn things off, cookies, caching, images, in case some people are at work and they're browsing, well, sites of ill repute, I suppose. Some people want to turn Moondoggy off completely. Not entirely sure why, but we know, of course, we'll listen to that request. I suppose they want the browser button to do nothing when you press it. Possibility, it's a possibility. All of these are definitely technically possible. None of them are completely off the table, but there are, usability problems. Where do we locate these options? What level of granularity should we provide? These are all things we're going to investigate as Dominion rolls on. Anyway, compatibility mode. There are a number of useful IGB websites out there that may no longer be maintained by their creator. No one has access to the source code, but they're still great tools for the Eve players. We've had a couple people ask us, well, can you make these sites work inside Moondoggy, either automatically or with the push of a button? We can technically take those old Eve links, show info and so on, and convert them into new style ones where they map to JavaScript commands. We have that list. We have a prototype version working, and we'd love to push it out if we have time. Not looking like it, though. This is really not something that we're comfortable having polished for Dominion 1.0. Certainly something we can look at for the future. More JavaScript hooks. IGB site authors, this is one that a number of you have posted about, requesting this hook, that hook. Can I get this information? Can I get that information? Sure. We can totally do these. These are actually really easy for us to do. We love doing them. They provide a lot of value for you. So come talk to us at our roundtable at 5 o'clock today over in RT2, just next door. And there are some limitations to keep in mind. This is always a one-way link. It's always a command link. There's no information querying there. So if you're trying to get the station that the user's in, if you're trying to find out what moons are nearby, probably not going to be possible. And these all have to be vetted for griefing potential. So those of you who are looking for something that can spam 50,000 conversation starts to your enemies, not looking at the web browser, sorry. Flash. Everyone loves Flash. YouTube uses Flash. Currently, this is enabled on CC. If you've played with our current build, it works. There's been some stability problems, which is, one of the things we've noticed. A lot of people have reported crashes in wbrowser.exe because of when using Flash. We've noticed a number of these internally. For this reason, we will be disabling Flash for the release of Dominion. In fact, we'll be disabling all plugins for the release of Dominion, as I mentioned earlier. These may get re-enabled in the future, and if they do get re-enabled in the future, we will include a user option to disable Flash or to disable really any plugin that we eventually enable in Moondoggy. But this will be on a case-by-case basis. Anyway, another thing that's been requested by users, particularly our more privacy-conscious users, is what I call multi-tier trust. And this is kind of a complex feature, so let me kind of go through this. What this would be is currently, if you trust a site, it receives all of your information. What we'd like to be able to do is place different sites into different, what I call, trust categories. Now, what that would mean is you would be able to define which headers would be sent to a site in a given trust category, and also which JavaScript calls out of the JavaScript hooks that site would be able to execute. There's a lot of usability work to be done here. There's a lot of headers, 10, 15?
Around that, yeah, about 15.
And we currently have 6 JavaScript hooks, but we're anticipating quite a large number more. It is a challenge to make this something that it doesn't look a lot like the corp management UI. Exactly. But yes, there's also some low-level plumbing to be done, actually implementing the trust categories, but compared to the usability work, that's pretty easy. I mean, the big value here is for the security-conscious user. Put site A in trust category A, send it my corp ID, send it my name, but don't send it my location. Sure. Other site, perhaps controlled by my enemies, is a jump route planner or something like that. Send it my location, but don't send it my corp ID because I don't want him knowing if 50 of my corp members are about to jump into his home system. Anyway, this is something we're going to definitely research post-Dominion. It's a really great concept. We really like the idea. Not for 1.0. You may now toss the rotten fruit. I believe you had a question.
Yeah, I have two questions. I think one of the last one already has been answered. First one about the blacklist and whitelist. Is the blacklist and whitelist static in the client and gets downloaded when the client starts, or every site you call gets passed through to CCP and check, yes, this is on blacklist, yes, this is on whitelist?
The question was, for the blacklist and whitelist, are the sites, if I understand this correctly, are they passed through to CCP for confirmation? The answer is no, the sites are not passed up to the server for confirmation. What happens is when you log on or when you open the browser, it downloads the whitelist and blacklist from the server, and then all the evaluation takes place on your client in wbrowser.exe or in ccpbrowser.exe. We're not going to start sending your information, your browsing history up to us. That would be silly. Come on. We're not Big Brother.
The second question was about this JavaScript hook.
Okay.
But at the moment, we are already told about several levels of trust for web pages. So if I take it right, if you push out Dominion and Moondoggy with the initial Dominion release, there will only be the option there is no trust for the web page. That means no call for show info pop-ups, etc. Nothing else.
No right-click set destination.
Right.
There's even possible with the
Or the complete option, show everything what I got, show my location, and
which nobody is going to do.
Yeah.
Okay. The question was, are the JavaScript hooks always on or off based on trusted sites? The answer is, at the moment, yes. However, we have the capability to take some of the safer ones and place them into a category where any site can perform them.
Mostly speaking about
show info.
Yeah. Destination and whatever. Right click. Give me information about this alliance. If I link this in my in-game browser, give me information about this corporation. Give me about this system or about this moon or whatever. Those links are merely show info links, which in my opinion should be open for all web pages. I don't want to trust every single web page which just wants to show me links to show info.
Of course.
So, because if, for example, myself, I'm running the .NET maps, if I want to create an in-game compatible link just to show info on an item, on a moon, on the system name, on an alliance name, not everybody wants to trust me and give his name, his alliance name, and his position to my web service just to be able to use the in-game options.
I agree, and we're definitely going to look at moving some of these into the no trust required or possibly have some other option to just disable JavaScript on certain web pages.
I agree with enabling the trusted sites for using things like open email, open market, give money, those commands, that should be on the trusted list, but I think the show info items should not be added to the trusted links.
That's very doable. Yeah. And certainly something we can investigate as we proceed further in development.
The question and answer section to talk with
you
about
please.
This
yeah, totally.
Please.
For example, show you already something.
It's a good idea.
1 second. We have another question back here. He's been holding his hand up for a little while.
Just a basic question when it comes to I use the Chrome a lot. So when you have the IGB open up, does the like that set a tab and put it into the new window?
No. Right now, the IGB is just one window with a bunch of tabs, and that's it. It's just the one browser window.
All right. Sorry, you were saying.
In your browser, if you make an href show info link, you can actually right-click on it, and if it is a system, you can do set destination. Will this be possible as well with the new IGB?
At the moment, no. Sorry, the question was, right now, if you have a link, such as a show info link or a system link in the game, you could right-click on it and set destination, do all these other options on it, just as you would an in-game link. Will that be possible with the new browser? The answer is, at the moment, no.
Not through right-click, but it could be possible as a JavaScript hook.
Next question. I already tested the Moondoggy web browser on PC, and what I've seen is that the window size is, I think, limited to around 590 pixels. So is it possible that is that the minimum size of the browser you can open, or is it because you can't resize it smaller? You just have this around 500 pixels, and you can't move it smaller. I've seen web pages in the last browsers for the current in-game browser who are just like small screens which attach under the overview to show, for example, current information about the system you're in. But with the current Moondoggy browser, which is limited to a minimum size of around 500 to 600 pixels, it would just be a normal window which you can't resize, which you can't make smaller.
The question was currently the Moondoggy browser is limited to a minimum width of 500 pixels. Is that a technical limitation? No, that's not a technical limitation. That's something I just kind of stuck in there because it looked bad if you made it smaller. All right, great. We can certainly look at making that smaller. Yes? The question will be, is there going to be a workaround for refresh session change? The answer is possibly. We're going to look at it over the next couple weeks. Anyone else? Well, thank you for coming.
Thank you.
You've been a great audience.